This year's climate negotiations kick off in just a couple of weeks, which has everyone asking, why? These negotiations, or COPs, have a track record of being not good, and this one is already being labelled especially not good before it's even begun. So what's gone wrong? What might it achieve? And is there anything we can do to stop it being a bad COP? I'm Adam, a climate scientist with a PhD from Oxford, sharing what you need to know about climate change. And right now, a lot of people want to know, are you going to the climate negotiations? Are you excited for COP? Will there be a third season of Loki? And the answers, respectively, are no, no, and you know I'm not allowed to share my Marvel secrets. The truth is that I've only been to one COP climate negotiation, and honestly, that was probably the moment I have felt most hopeless about climate change. But things have changed since then. I'll explain why towards the end of this video, but first, what even is a COP? Let's get into it. COPs are the normally yearly negotiations about climate change, where the world's nations and a bunch of businesses and organizations and activists for good measure get together to try to solve climate change. So far, there have been 27 COPs, and well, they still haven't solved climate change. And so time for one more. This year's is COP28. COP stands for the Conference of the Parties, which is just the worst, most nondescript name ever. I mean, it genuinely annoys me how uninformative it is. Because COPs are basically the only time each year that the whole world gets together to discuss climate like this, there tends to be a lot of media hype and high expectations around COPs. And COPs basically never live up to these expectations. The way we talk about COPs is pretty much how your friend speaks about their rubbish partner. Look, they're trying their best. I'd rather have them than no one at all. Maybe this time will be different. So maybe this time will be different. But different isn't always better. This COP is taking place from the 30th of November to 12th of December 2023, and the controversy around it started pretty much as soon as the location was announced, the United Arab Emirates, or UAE, which is a petrostate, which is a fancy way of saying a country that loves doing the thing that the negotiations are all about stopping doing. Okay, but to allay everyone's fears about having it in the UAE, they appointed Sultan al Jaber as the COP president, who is the CEO of ADNOC. ADNOC stands for the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. Now that's what I call an informative acronym. So yeah, it's fair to say that not all fears have been allayed, and this appointment has been labelled a breathtaking conflict of interest that could open the floodgates for greenwashing and oil and gas deals to keep exploiting fossil fuels. And over 100 US and EU lawmakers have called for Al Jaber to be replaced. Interestingly though, some Twitter users have been extremely positive about the appointment, saying things like, the UAE's commitment to being the perfect host for COP28 is a testament to its leadership in tackling climate change. And if it's surprising to you that real people would tweet those things, rest assured, those tweets are not from real people. There's been a swarm of fake accounts tweeting stuff like this, a lot of them with blue tick verification. So thanks again, Elon, for making Twitter the incredibly functional and enjoyable site that it is today. On top of this tweet campaign, members of Al Jaber's team have been caught trying to greenwash his Wikipedia, which is just kind of embarrassing. And then there was that whole thing where the ADNOC oil company was able to read COP emails. So yeah, this COP is off to a rocky start before it's even started. Personally, I would never invite an oil company to read my emails, and I don't even have a Wikipedia page to greenwash. I actually don't even want to sell you things you don't need. Videos like this one are entirely supported by my amazing patrons, not sponsorships or ads. If you're into what I'm doing here, go ahead and subscribe. And if you want to join the almost 100 patrons supporting the channel, that would blow my mind. Click over here for that. Okay, so COPs are a bit rubbish, and this COP is already a cause for concern. But these negotiations are still unique opportunities for all countries, from the most responsible to the most at risk, to be heard and take action. So let's talk about what action could actually be taken at this year's COP. Top of the list is the conclusion of the global Stocktake. This process takes stock of progress on climate change, and its report was published a couple of months ago in September. Spoiler alert, it said there's not nearly enough progress on climate change. We're now heading for about 2.5 degrees Celsius of global warming by the end of the century. This is a huge improvement on the situation a decade ago, where it looked like we were heading for more like 4 degrees Celsius, and shows that these negotiations are making a difference. But it's clear we're not making enough of a difference to keep us well under the 2 degrees, or ideally limit warming to 1.5 degrees, which, by the way, are the targets of the Paris Climate Agreement. But the Stocktake also outlines how we could get back on track. At COP28, governments are discussing these findings and recommendations and hopefully strengthening their climate plans. That said, COP28's president already put out a call out for countries to toughen up their goals, and well, it's been met with deafening silence. In terms of more concrete goals, the COP presidency is also pushing for a global goal to triple renewables by the end of the decade, which is indeed one of the things that the world needs to be doing to halt global warming. For more on what halting global warming would actually look like in practice, click over here. On top of all that, there's also the question of money, or actually lots of questions of money. One question is whether and how a loss and damage fund will be set up, and what that fund will actually look like. This is effectively to compensate and support countries suffering the most severely from climate change. But crucially, no one knows how much money there'll actually be in this loss and damage fund, or who it will come from. And that's a problem because there's a track record of money not showing up. So higher income countries previously promised lower income countries $100 billion in climate finance from 2020 onwards. And well, they still haven't hit that target after all this time. So at this COP, again, the goal is to get the rich countries to live up to their word and put their money where their mouths are. As Sultan al Jaber has said, expectations are very high. Trust is very low. Side note, but the country that's failing the worst at paying its fair share is, surprise, surprise, the US. This isn't because the US is opposed to giving money to other countries. In fact, the House just approved $14 billion for Israel, so make of that what you will. On top of all these practical problems COP28 will be tackling, there's also the big question of wording. Al Jaber has previously called for phasing out fossil fuel emissions, and then switched to calling for a transition that phases down the use of fossil fuels. The problem with the first wording is that it could allow a massive caveat for still using fossil fuels, but hoping carbon capture will stop their emissions somehow. The problem with the second is that it's about phasing down, where really many argue that we just need to stop using fossil fuels as soon as possible. And the problem with all of this is that it just feels so arbitrary. Yes, words matter, but actions matter more, and time again we've seen that the actions simply haven't followed the words. And given that 2023 will almost certainly be the hottest year ever recorded, and emissions still aren't falling, you can see why these discussions feel so far removed from the urgency of the situation. Okay, so deep breath. I guess maybe now you can see why I don't go to COPs. But I said up top that things have changed since the COP I went to way back in 2018. So how? Well, back then it felt like so much greenwashing and self-congratulating and so little action. But something was already shifting without me noticing. You see, that was the first COP which heard from a climate activist called Greta Thunberg.
We have not come here to beg world leaders to care. We have come here to let you know that change is coming, whether you like it or not.
Since then, the climate movement has exploded, and the public and press are holding politicians to account like never before. And so what gets said and done at COP matters like never before. Yes, COPs set out to do too little, and often they fail to achieve even that. But they are unique opportunities for all of us to demand change and to have our voices heard. Which is why, despite everything I've been talking about, I'm still hoping for a good COP. The goal of all of this is to stop the world from heating, but how can we actually do that? Well, I've put together a playlist answering all your net zero questions. You can check that out over here. Okay, until next time, bye.